Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to today's Partner Web Conference. This is Fast Track Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Tech Talk. Today's topic, UK Digital Tax, VAT Declaration in Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations. My name is Janice and I'm going to be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events and the audio can be heard through your PC speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to be a part of a recorded session, we ask that you please disconnect now. Attendees may access the web conference recording within 72 hours via the same registration link that was used to attend today's live broadcast. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, you can turn on the Q&A panel by selecting the question mark icon that is located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We do have presenters standing by to answer your questions throughout the session. Now, on to the show. Presenting for us today, they are product managers from the Dynamics Globalization team. We have Adam Trukavka and Liza Golub. So without any further delay, Adam, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Janice. Welcome. Welcome to our Tech Talk session dedicated to making tax digital for VAT in the United Kingdom. My name is Adam Trukavka, and together with me today is joining Elizaveta Golub.
Yeah, hello everybody. Sorry, Adam, looks like you are muted.
Thank you, Lisa. As Janice mentioned in the introduction, Lisa and I work in the Dynamics Globalization department at Microsoft. But who we are, our team delivers mostly functional and linguistic localization for Microsoft Dynamics family of products. And we also manage localization solutions published by ISVs on Microsoft App Stores, which are natural extension of the localization delivered by Microsoft. Apart from the explicit country-specific functionality which our team delivers, we also develop globalization tools and services. Among those globalization tools and services, our team developed specifically configurable frameworks, which makes localization easier to deploy in the production environments. In today's session, we'll be talking about configurable electronic reporting and configurable electronic messages. And those are globalization frameworks which require almost no coding skills and can be configured by either implementation partner companies or power business users. We believe it's very easy to use in the real life. So in terms of agenda for today, in today's session, we want to focus on the implementation of solution for electronic VAT reporting in the UK. We want to spend majority of the time presenting live from the system, from Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operation, and actually this will be the upcoming update of number 10.01, which customers and partners who are part of the Microsoft Insider program or other early adopters program will be able to obtain very soon. Major part of the session will be dedicated to configuring, as I mentioned, those electronic messages and electronic reporting frameworks. And primary part of the session, at the end of the session, we'll try to submit the VAT declaration to live service, the sandbox service at HMRC, the tax office in the UK, their service sandbox. If time allows, at the end, we'll answer your questions, which are coming through the questions panel. So please keep posting the questions. We will try to address majority of them during during this session responding to you. If not, we will follow up with a frequently asked questions document, which will be published together with this deck at the Infopedia website. All right, so the changes in the UK. What has really changed in the UK in the area of tax reporting? Basically, the immediate implication of the new law introduced last year requires companies doing accounting using software accounting systems. It may sound surprising, but it should not be surprise for our customers, the customers of the Dynamics products. But probably that is a major change across many businesses in the smaller segment of the UK market. And the other implication of the new law, which is important to realize, is that actually the first accounting period, which is with necessity of the bookkeeping in the software, is April 2019, which means that only tax settlements results from April 2019 are subject for electronic tax reporting with a deadline in June. June, because there is general rule about reporting deadline of 1 month and 7 days from end of the reporting period. This is frequently asked questions to us, and we respond very often to stressed partners and customers when the feature will be available, because we need to report taxes in April. This is not necessarily true. For monthly reporting companies, you have time until June to report the taxes. And we are still shipping the feature very early. We are talking like March this year. And companies reporting taxes quarterly, if their quarter starts in April, will have deadline in August for reporting taxes. However, please in mind, all of these dates are not universal for all of you, and you have to check your reporting deadlines individually, or you already know them. All right, let's talk about how the solution for making tax digital have been implemented in the Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. The implementation of the solution in the D365 for finance and operation involves localization tools and the frameworks which I mentioned at the beginning. And those tools are commonly used in localization solutions for many other countries. And implementation of MTD, Making Tax Digital, is just another application to realize this UK tax reporting requirements. The primary localization framework which we use here is electronic reporting, which provides us with capability to configure electronic report of VAT declaration in JSON and Excel formats. Secondly, we use ER, the electronic reporting, to configure content of incoming and outgoing messages, and also for processing out to authorization. Besides, we utilize electronic reports formats as a kind of low-code containers, allowing us to transform dynamic service addresses in the interoperation with HMRC Web Service endpoints. Second localization framework or a tool playing key role in this solution is electronic messages, which is also nothing new to users from other countries who consume our localization solutions. We use electronic messages extensively in statutory reporting, wherever structure of electronic transmission to government services requires that. For making tax digital solution, electronic messages support entire process of interoperability with HMRC Web Service. And this works the same way for the production and sandbox configuration of HMRC Web Service. The third, the last but not least capability of the system which we use slightly is the data management tool, which allows us to import predefined configurations of electronic messages. And what is specifically new upcoming in this solution for Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations? Effectively, we are delivering configuration of electronic reports for VAT return, the VAT Declaration. Actually, two of them. you may expect we will deliver electronic report, which is providing output in required JSON file format for submitting VAT return to HMRC, and we delivered a report in Excel format for previewing data before submission, or actually during doing the tax settlement. You can, instead of like before running SSRS report, you can now decide about running the new report in Excel format. The actual core of the MTD solution is configuration of electronic messages. The electronic messages have been configured in a way to correspond with requirements of HMRC MTD for VAT service and its specific endpoints. The HMRC MTD for VAT service provides number of endpoints for third-party integration. Some of them are mandatory and some of them are optional. In the configuration which we will share with our customers, we implemented retrieving information about the actual VAT obligation and submitting the VAT return for required period of obligation, which are considered as mandatory scope of the interoperability with HMRC service. We have also implemented retrieving VAT liabilities and payments information, which are defined by HMRC as optional integrations. In the future, we may expect HMRC will provide much more endpoints to the service, and I believe partners or even customers will be able to implement integrations for them using patterns we provide in the configurations for endpoints which are available presently. For instance, the view of VAT return endpoint is so optional that we believe it's not necessary to implement, and this is not implemented in our solution. Okay, enough of PowerPoint. Let's focus on the new VAT return reports and its configuration in electronic reporting. In this demo, I want to walk you through reporting using electronic reporting configurations and setting up the electronic reporting for VAT declaration. Let me log into my environment. Give it a second. All right, so this is a preview version of Finance and Operations, Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, which is update 10.01, which is just around the corner to be released. Partners who are part of the Insider program and customers who are part of early adopters, they can closely track availability of this system on LCS. And I want to show you how to access the electronic reporting and how to import the VAT declarations, which are configured in electronic reporting. So normally, when you will use this system for importing configurations, you will use LCS, and you have to configure LCS to reach the shared assets library. And that shared asset library will be one of your repositories for reaching the configurations. Here I'm simulating this behavior using local files, but in the documentation which we'll deliver with the feature, there will be step-by-step instruction how to access those formats and how to import them. You will have a similar view in the using the shared asset library from LCS. Among other formats, there is almost like thousands of other electronic reporting formats already published on LCS. You should be looking for this format specifically, and we will describe this step by step in the documentation, as I mentioned. But in general, the entire solution is built around those configurations, which are the first, which I'm highlighting right now, is electronic messages framework model, which we'll use later in electronic messages for processing actions and steps of workflow in electronic messages. The major part, which is delivering the data and receiving the data from HMRC, is the tax declaration model. This is new tax declaration model for VAT statements, and we have already on the market different VAT statements models, which we are going gradually to deprecate and replace with this new model upcoming for the first time for the UK. And this tax declaration model allows us to configure those specific formats of VAT declaration output file in JSON and Excel as a solution. There is when you import those models to your configuration, you will use the import all functions, and you may expect if you go back to electronic reporting section of the product reporting configurations, you should expect all those formats being imported in following structure. Then the next step you will do, specifically I will be talking only about the tax declaration model right now. The next step you will do is to make sure that you mark this tax declaration model mapping, which is the information for the system mapping the data sources from Dynamics 365 to the model, that this model mapping is default. So you will switch this from no to yes. And the next step, which is required to do in those new VAT declaration formats, is that they require some little configuration, which makes them very generic and very easy to use by lots of customers. That configuration is in area of application specific parameters, and there's a setup button which you will use to access the configuration of those reports. Each of those reports, depending on version which you will try to use in your system, has a setup which is telling to the tax declaration specifically which information to capture for filtering tax transactions in terms of tax direction and sales tax code. We are delivering this configuration as a generic configuration, which should work primarily out of the box. If you import that configuration, this should work for you. But if there is any reason you want to differentiate between tax codes for normal transactions and credit note transactions, you have an option here to select sales tax code to limit the filtering criteria up to the required tax codes which were used in your system. So this is the configuration of the tax declaration application parameters. If you want to use this Excel spreadsheet format as a preview for your tax settlement, you need to go to sales tax section in general ledger parameters. And we have added here for the UK possibility to choose one of those formats. So for instance, in this electronic reporting section, I'm choosing VAT declaration Excel format as my format for output of the tax declaration preview. Now with this setup, if I go to posted sales tax payments, which is result of the posted sales tax settlement, you may print the report, and instead of previously used SSRS report, here will come the Excel spreadsheet with the preview of VAT 100 report, which is this VAT declaration for the UK. And that's it for the VAT declaration format and the new stuff which we are delivering. Now I will go back to my presentation. Just very briefly, as I mentioned, we'll give you this deck after the presentation, and you can look up through those slides. Just for reference, what I have shown you is that you have to import from LCS additional formats which are for electronic messages framework model, tax declaration, and apart from this deck, you will have a documentation which will guide you how to and what to import from the LCS. You have to bear in mind if you want to use those formats as a preview models, make sure that you configure this in the general ledger parameters sales tax section, and the VAT declaration itself requires configuration of application specific parameters, importing them with the default setup or customization if necessary. Okay, that's it from my side for now. In terms of demo, I'm handing over right now to Lisa, and Lisa will guide you through all the flavors of electronic messages. Lisa, back to you.
Hello again, everybody. And thank you very much, Adam, for such informative introduction and overview of the tools involved into the solution dedicated to the Making Tax Digital for VAT on Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. Now we already know which electronic reporting configurations must be installed in the system and how they need to be set up. And I would like to go through the whole process of setup and feature usage. But before I proceed with demonstration of the next steps of the system preparation to interpret with MTD for VAT endpoints, I have to spend some small time on reviewing of what exactly HMRC provides for making tax digital for VAT. And first of all, we need to know that basically there are two types of infrastructure provided. The first one is sandbox, and this sandbox web application of this type serves for testing purposes only, giving an opportunity to try interoperating with MTD for VAT endpoints. And due to the fact that in the real life it will only be allowed to make just one VAT return submission for each of the VAT return period, this option can be very useful. To be able to create a sandbox web application, it is needed to register on HMRC Developer Hub. Having this registration, it is allowed to create under it an application of sandbox type and subscribe this application for VAT and create test user APIs. This application can be further used for testing purposes, and I will show you how. Besides that, having those subscriptions, a person can get access to all the documentation on these APIs and get all the related use directly from HMRC. As for the production, when a company decides or already obliged to report via MTD for VAT in a real life, this company will need to go to HMRC web portal and create its own HMRC online account. It requires to have VAT registration number in the UK. And even if a company has already signed up for income tax, they will have to register for VAT via MTD. During that registration, the company will get a user ID and password, which will be used for further authorization. When an HMRC online account is created, the company will need to link it to an HMRC compatible software. Our customers on Dynamics 365 versions will be able to select Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. Having this knowledge, I think we can proceed with our demo in the system. And as we remember, we have already installed all the necessary electronic reporting configurations which are needed for MTD for VAT and application-specific parameters required for VAT declaration of specific company, and they are already defined here in the demo system as well. And the next step basically is setting up of electronic messaging functionality. This functionality is situated on the tax module, and setup is in setup electronic messages menu item. And this functionality is supposed to support various processes of electronic interoperation between finance and operations and the systems that governments and legislative authorities offer for reporting, submitting, and receiving official information. Electronic messaging was additionally enhanced for the finance and operation versions supporting MTD for VAT to support open standard OAuth 2.0, which lets the end user grant authority to the application to interact with HMRC on their behalf without sharing their access credentials. Thus, the electronic messages functionality make it possible to set up a whole process of interoperating with HMRC for purposes to fulfill VAT obligations of a company. It is integrated with electronic reporting model, and therefore system administrator can set up electronic reporting formats for electronic messages. Lots of entities are involved and need to be set up, like electronic messages statuses, different actions which will be available to run for the electronic messages, as well as the web applications connected to HMRC sandbox or production applications, and web services supposed to be used for interoperations. Thus, the whole process of such setup could look very complex, at least for the first time. And this is why our globalization team did and tested already the setup of electronic messages for making tax digital for VAT. And this predefined setup will be available for downloading by our partners and customers from the LCS portal and from shared asset library on it. It will look like in data packages part of this web portal. A zip archive, zip file will be will include all the entities involved into the setup of electronic messages. So the system administrator will be able to download the package from that data packages part of LCS portal and save it on a local computer. Then he will need to go to workspaces here and data management. Then he or she will click on import button, type a name, and select source data format as package. And click on upload button and select the zip file just downloaded, from the LCS portal, like this. Sometimes it can require several minutes to wait, especially when this process is started for the very first time, because the system needs to be initialize the data entities in it, and it is needed to click. It is not needed to click any buttons additionally whilst waiting, but you can continue working in a separate page of your browser during this time. As soon as we can see that data entities from the package are listed on the page of the browser. We can click on import button on the action pane here. I will not click on it right now because all the setup is already prepared in the system for this demo. But just make sure before you import this configurations, or I would say data entities, just make sure that you are working in the particular legal entity you want to. So let's now check what we have already prepared in electronic messages processing. And this setup will be provided through that package, and two processing which can be used independently are already in place. And first of them is UK MTD VAT returns, and it will serve to interoperate with production HMRC web service. And UK MTD VAT test will serve to interoperate with sandbox HMRC environment. And we can also review what web applications will be delivered in the setup. The first one is Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. It will be used to interoperate with production HMRC environment, and the sandbox to interoperate with sandbox HMRC environment. The feature documentation will be published on Docs Microsoft Command. It will include full description of electronic messages processing for the UK, and making tax digital for VAT. Well, when we set up data, the setup data is imported to the system. It will be needed to set up additionally, manually, VAT settlement period to define from which settlement period transactions will need to be considered for VAT settlement, or sorry, VAT return. To do so, we go to tax module, set up electronic messages, and populate records action. This populate VAT return records action is responsible for collecting that data in the system which is needed for the purposes of specific electronic processing. As soon as our processing is related to VAT return, we collect data from tax report voucher table. And then we click on Edit Query button on the action pane of that data source setup tab. And here for settlement period field, we define that particular settlement period. And when it is done, two more important steps in the setup need to be mentioned. They are needed for purposes of restricting of access of different security roles, different security groups in the system for electronic messages processing by defining them here on security role fast tab of each of the electronic messaging processing. And the last step of setup is related to web applications and the restricting of access to an access token stored in the database of the system in encrypted format. Because when a request of any type is going to be addressed to HMRC, the access token must be used. For the security purposes, access to this token must be restricted for only those security roles and groups which must be allowed to address requests to HMRC. These security groups must be defined here. Sorry. Well, we are done with the demo of setup, and we may quickly review that. For now, we know how to import the setup of electronic messages and why it is recommended to do so, how to define settlement period for reporting of VAT return, and how to define security groups to restricting access to electronic messaging processing and access token of web application. And the next part of our demo is dedicated to the authorization of the web application in the system to get ready for interoperation with HMRC on business purposes. Basically, in the real life, the authorization of MTD for VAT requires a user ID and password associated with VAT registration number. And when a company representative has already obtained these credentials, it is possible to proceed directly with authorization. But when we intend to work with a sandbox for testing purposes, we need to obtain testing credentials. To be able to do so, we need to copy and paste parameters of the sandbox application. They are client ID, client secret, and client token directly from HMRC Developer Hub, where they are defined for each application in so-called manage credentials part. So when you have already created a web application of Sandbox inside the HMRC Developer Hub, you may copy and paste these authorization parameters from that area to your system. Okay, when application parameters are already at place, we can get a test user credentials. This can be done by using electronic messages form. It is in tax module under inquiries and reports group, message items, electronic messages form. Here we select UK MTD VAT test. I'm as an administrator on this virtual machine. This is why I can see both processing, but as you know, it can be the access can be restricted on the level of processing, and if user is not allowed to operate in some particular processing, he will not even see it in this form. And as for the test user, we click on new button on messages fast up, and create test user request is already predefined in this dialog. Now this electronic message, which will be used for retrieving of test user information, is already created, and we can just simply generate the format which is used for test user request, and it is automatically sent to HMRC, and as we can see, the response we already received from HMRC. All the actions related to a particular electronic message are reflected in action log, and we can see which user and when operate with the electronic message. We select the electronic message and click on attachment button. As we can see, that was our request to HMRC. And this is the response which we received from HMRC. This response basically include several important parameters. First of all, it is user ID and user password, which will be used during the authorization process. Moreover, this response will include information about VAT registration number, which must be used together with those credentials. This VAT registration number must be basically copied and pasted into your legal entity to registration IDs. Okay, this is how to get a test user to work with the sandbox environment. But now we need to do authorization of our application in HMRC. For this purpose, from this point, when we have user credentials already, our operations will be the same. Either we are acting to authorize for sandbox or production web application. We will go to web application form and select sandbox for our purposes, and we click on get authorization code like this. We will need to define here a scope. it must be write VAT and read VAT to be able to use the same application for both purposes. Here we click on Continue button and put the credentials which we just received for this is actually not exactly those which we just received, but those which I previously received, but for the same purposes. And here HMRC grant us an authorization code. This authorization code will be available just during 10 minutes. This is why we need to quickly copy this by this button and go back to our web applications form. And now we need to initiate a retrieving of access token. And as once again, it must be done during only 10 minutes. Click on Obtain Access Token here and just simply paste the code which we just received from HMRC. Click on OK button, and as we can see, our access token was successfully obtained. We cannot see neither access token or refresh access token anywhere in the interface because it is stored in the system in encrypted format. The only information which is related to those tokens is available here in access token will expire in. And because of each access token will expire in 4 hours, we can see how the time here can be changed, will be changed during the time. Okay, basically, system administrator can refresh this access token by this button manually, but a business user will not need to do so. And this operation of refreshing the access token will be done hiddenly from the business user and automatically by the system. Okay. I think this is all about authorization. Now we know how to get information, how to get test user credentials, and how to get authorization code and access token, which we can use further. And I think we can go to the next part of our demo. And we proceed with demonstration of how to operate in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations to prepare and submit VAT return to HMRC. As we remember, HMRC provides for making tax digital for VAT 5 endpoints to support 5 operations: VAT obligation retrieving, VAT return submission, VAT liabilities, payments, and returns review. And we also know that VAT obligation retrieving and VAT return submission are mandatory to be supported by MTD compatible software, when the other 3 endpoints are optional and may be implemented on voluntary basis. Today, in this demo, we will focus on mandatory endpoints, VAT obligation retrieving and VAT return submission. Well, first of all, I need to mention that it is supposed that there are, I will switch to the system again. There are period intervals in the sales tax settlement periods defined for the settlement period, which was set up for populate records action. And company use sales tax settlement procedure at least at the end of VAT return period. As a result of this procedure, sales tax payment transactions, as a result of this procedure, sales tax payment transactions are generated, and I have already prepared 2 such transactions for this demo, as I would like to illustrate that the solution in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations allows to have several sales tax payment transactions related to the same interval, and it will be possible to submit aggregated amounts result in them, but we must always remember that on HMRC side, only one submission can be accepted for one period. Now, when we have sales tax settlement done, we can go to electronic messages form again. From this form, all the actions related to VAT return preparation and submission should be done. We select our testing processing and click on new button here. Now we are not going to create any test user, but we select create VAT obligation request, because this is what we intend to do now. As we can see, a new electronic message is created in this table, and we need to define for this electronic message from and to date. These dates are not taken into account by testing environment of HMRC, and the response will not be, will not correlate with these dates, but we need to fulfill these values. We can also type some description here. For example, like this. And after from and to date are fulfilled, we can just click on send report. System has already predefined the next action which must be run for this electronic message. It is test retrieve of VAT obligations from HMRC, and user will need to click on OK button only. By that button, request is sent to HMRC and response is received. As you can see, the dates in the response are not in correlation with those which we set up, but this is how it works for sandbox environment. As we can see, also the electronic message for VAT obligation request is status is updated to completed VAT obligation request, and all the actions are stored respectively. And moreover, we can see that 2 more electronic messages are created here. One of them already completed, and this is according to the information which is in HMRC for this particular period. As we can see, the HMRC status of this electronic message is fulfilled, and it was received in this particular date by HMRC. When the second electronic message is not closed for now, it is open in HMRC, and as we can see, the from and to dates are in the second quarter of 2017. What the business user will need to do as a next step, business user will need to collect data from the system from that particular sales tax payment table, and for this purpose, collect data button need to be clicked. Here we have predefined action, and clicking on OK button, we can see that 2 electronic message items, each of them related to the particular sales tax payment in the original table, are populated here as message items. We can quickly go to original document here and review posted transactions as we usually do in the system. And moreover, user may want to exclude, for example, some particular transaction from reporting, and this is done by updating of status respectively to excluded. If electronic message item is in excluded status, it will not be considered for reporting, when the populated one will be. If we would like to revert status to the initial one, we can also use update status button, and then now both message items will be considered for reporting. When business user decides that the VAT, that all the data is already collected and it is already time to start generation of the format, update status on electronic message level must be clicked, and new status will be ready to generate VAT return. For electronic message in ready to generate VAT return status, the next step is already activated, and it is generate report button. Here, business user can select either it is needed to preview VAT return. In this case, an Excel format will be generated, and to review it, it is needed to select the electronic message and open the attachments. Here in the attachment, we can see a VAT settlement Excel file is created, and we can open or store it anywhere in the system. I mean in the computer. But when a business user would like to generate a JSON file, generate file for submission must be selected. As we can see, status of the electronic message was changed to generated VAT return, and the next action is activated, and it will be send report. The next attachment is saved in relation to the electronic message, and business user will be able to review it even in JSON if it will be needed. When our electronic message is in generate VAT return status, business user can simply send it by the next action, which is test submit VAT return here. But before the submission, user will need to confirm that the information which will be transmitted to HMRC is true and complete by OK button. Now our JSON file was transmitted to HMRC, and the response was received. All the related actions are already in action log and can be reviewed. Message items are in status submitted, which means that they are included into the report. And we can also review the response if we would like to. It is here in the attachments as well. If an error will be received from HMRC, the respective response, the respective action in the action log will include information about the particular error which is transmitted as a response from HMRC. Okay. Fine. As now we know, as a result of this demo, we know how to retrieve information about VAT obligations from HMRC by selecting Create VAT Obligation Request Action, and how to generate VAT return in Excel for preview or in JSON format for further submission, and how to submit this file to this generated file to HMRC. And the last topic I would like to share today is related to security gain. This table on this slide shows the information about security privileges, duties, and roles created for the feature. Basically, a system administrator will be able to set up different roles for each of particular step and operation to provide as much flexibility for security setup as it can be required in different companies to maintain, view, and operate with electronic messages. And this is basically all I wanted to tell in this demo today about the features. You can see it is implemented in a very configurable way, providing a lot of flexibility and using the most progressive tools targeting to deliver the most effective way of working and with full respect to the security aspects inside and outside of Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. I thank you very much for your attention, and I think we can go to Q&A. Adam?
Yes, thank you very much, Lisa. Over the time, I've been responding to many of your questions, and I published also a couple of answers. So I think we have a couple of minutes, literally, to address few most interesting topics. So most oftenly asked question was about whether there is coming solution for AX 2012 R3. Yes, the solution is coming. The following information is that the solution in AX 2012 R3 is much less, much more simplified, because AX 2012 R3 does not contain those frameworks which we are discussing here. We are taking this extended time to navigate you through the new functionality, especially for many of you, if you are customers in the UK, you have not been exposed yet to this electronic reporting frameworks and electronic messages, but I can assure you those frameworks are on the market for many years, and in other countries which have introduced the regulatory requirements for electronic reporting much earlier, they using solutions based on electronic reporting and electronic messages framework. So in the UK, if you are using only digital payments, electronic payments functionality, you might have used electronic reports already. If not, the introduction of this MTD for VAT is for the first time. Customers using D365 will use electronic reporting and electronic messages. But the framework is stable and it's used in many countries. And the only difference between AX 2012 R3 is that we do not downport this functionality to the legacy versions. The following question is when we will present a solution for AX 2012 R3. I will publish information about that in the document with frequently asked questions. We are planning session on March 15th, but in other framework of web conferences, it's user groups frameworks, Dynamics 365 user group frameworks. There is only one session on March 15th. If you already belong to that user group for Dynamics 365, you can look up through the schedule of those sessions. There are sessions every day in framework of the user groups. And we will talk, we will spend some time on AX 2012 R3 during our session on March 15th. Also, there is a user group summit in Europe, in Amsterdam at the end of March, and especially on March 29. I will have a session about exactly the same topic, but with more emphasis on electronic messages. In scope of that session, I will touch on the solution which we discussed today, but also can follow up if anyone would participate in that summit. We can have a private session or meeting with which we can explain the solution of AX 2012. I think we are over time today, so just a last comment. In case with this deck, which will be published together with the recording, we are providing you with some useful links, specifically if you are new to electronic reporting or electronic messages. There is extensive documentation on Microsoft Docs about it. There is also a few links to HMRC website, which can, if you never read about making tax digital requirements until today, there is some good links to start with. There was a lot of questions during the Q&A about specific customer setup. I cannot respond to interpretation of the HMRC law or the tax law in the UK. I'm not a lawyer. So please either contact your HMRC with your specific questions if the law is, for instance, applicable in your region, in your island, or anywhere. This kind of questions are for the HMRC, the tax office. We are just providing solution for their regulations. And if you want to get in touch with us, please participate in Microsoft Insider program. And if you can navigate to Yammer, there is a Yammer group dedicated to globalization features. This is the place where we reside. We answer questions. We provide information, additional information, files, and additional content for partners and customers who are part of the Insider program or Early Adopters program. And thank you very much for today. Thank you very much, Lisa, for great presentation. Thank you very much, audience, for bearing with us over this time. And we hope you will use this feature, and it will be covering the most important part of your business, which is paying taxes. Good luck with that. Thank you very much. Back to you, Janice.
All right, thank you, Adam. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a brief moment here and bring your attention to a link that I posted in the Q&A panel. That's a link to a short survey for this web conference, and we ask that you please take a moment before logging out to access it. We hope that you found today's information helpful, and if you enjoyed today's web conference, have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, or you'd like to submit topics for future web conferences, this is your chance to let us know. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. And that is going to conclude today's web conference. Attendees can access the web conference recording via the same registration link that was used to attend today's live broadcast. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters, Adam and Lisa, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today.